Yeah, you sure? I mean, it's sunny in Leeds. Does that happen? No, so a bit more excitement, you know. You all right? All right, good evening. My name is Lemara Lindsay-Prince. I'm a former editor at Penguin Random House, and I now run something called Studio Lemara. I'm very excited to be here in Leeds this evening with none other than my man, Jason Allen-Paisant, who I'm sure you know, and if you don't know right now, you're really going to get to know to talk about his phenomenal book, The Possibility of Tenderness, a Jamaican memoir of plants and dreams. As you can see, I have a different version to the one you are all going to buy. Look at me, you're all going to buy this book for reasons we'll reveal in a bit. But I just want to introduce this fabulous man here, who more than the author that sits in front of me is a dear friend. So Jason Allen-Paisant is a Jamaican writer and multi-award-winning poet. He is the author of 2 critically acclaimed books of poetry, Thinking with Trees and Self-Portrait as Othello, which won the UK's 2, I have to emphasize, not 1, but 2 most prestigious poetry awards for 2023. The T.S. Eliot Prize, right? Can we get a clap? Thank you. The T.S. Eliot Prize and the Forward Prize as well. And I'm sure there is many more accolades to come with this beautiful work. He is also a professor of critical theory and creative writing at the University of Manchester and associate editor of literary journal Callaloo. Jason lives here in Leeds. Make some noise for Leeds. You can tell I'm a South Londoner. Make some noise, everyone. Come on. He lives here in Leeds with his partner and 2 children. So everyone, please give a round of applause to Jason Allen-Paisant. So, yeah, go on, my man. Talk.
It's so good to see, and because of the lighting, I'm gradually seeing the familiar faces. I see Helen, I see Judith, I see so many friends. Thank you for coming out to support the work and to listen to me present this book, which hopefully you're going to take away with you. I'm grateful for that. I want to say how grateful I am, though, for Lemara coming all the way from London up here to host this event for us. Now, let me tell you a little bit in case I don't think you would know. So Lemara is the person who actually acquired this book at Penguin Random House, the Hutchinson Heinemann imprint. And there's a lot to be said about that. I mean, just the other day I was just reflecting about how great it is that a British woman of Jamaican and Grenadian heritage. Yes, I see Jacob. Giving you a big up as well. Jacob Ross, who's up there. But she made a pitch. It didn't have to go to Hutchinson Heinemann, but the pitch just clinched it for me. She's saying, here is a book. Here is a ground that I am familiar with. The story of your grandmother, the story of her home, the story of the land. And that connection played out in the editing of the book. That kind of vision that comes from the familiarity with those concerns helped to shape the book. And so I'm just deeply honored that you took on this work. I'm honored that you're here in person to celebrate it with me. And just big up for all of that, and big up for the kinship. Lemara has subsequently left publishing.
I look better for it.
It's good to see. I've also been reflecting on how publishing has changed. It's still beset by many problems, but the fact that I, as a black author in Britain, can encounter you in 2020. What was it? 2022.
2, 3.
Yeah, so probably 2.
2022.
it's a big thing. You know, it shows the changes that have happened in this country in the publishing industry, to at least have the opportunity to meet somebody like yourself. So I just want to say thank you. Before going into, I'm going to do 2 readings. The first one is to open the evening. I'm going to do a reading to close as well. The section I'm reading from is, and I also have to say big up to my wife, Lucille. You mentioned Lucille. It's right there in the second row. And my 2 kids, Joyce and Imani. And yeah, my wife is the linchpin of my support system. So I couldn't do all of this work without her. So I'm just grateful. I have to single her out for honor. So this is from a section, chapter 4, called The Teachings of Plants. And just one line by way of contextualization. I'm in Jamaica at this point, and I meet a herbalist Rastaman called Congolin, who is will lead me into some remembering, some reminiscences, some reconnection with the land, with plants, and so on. But also will teach me things. So I walk many grounds. I walk the grounds in Jamaica, and this is one of the experiences, right? So here we go. Just take a drink of water. Lubricate things. It's day 4 of my trip to Jamaica. After walking for more than an hour, I am tired. I sit on the sharp grooves of a limestone rock. My backside is uncomfortable. I'm happy to enjoy a bit of rest while Congolin, the herbalist Rasta I've befriended, goes off to help his farmer brethren receive a $1,000 note lost somewhere on the hillside. I met Congolin yesterday in the street right here in Coffee Grove. This your man you need to talk to, Mama's old friend Mas Laisha had declared, his eyes beaming as he used his head to point to Congolin, a short, skinny Rastaman with friendly eyes and a permanently affixed smile. When I meet him, he is wearing a small backpack, which I imagine might contain herbs. I stand at the roadside, listening to him speak to the group of men gathered there. The men listened attentively and with respect to the authoritative medicine man. Knowledge poured out of him about all sorts of plants, ones I had known and others about which I had no clue. Plants whose uses I'd heard about and others whose virtues I'd never suspected. The things he's managed to do that have baffled even the doctors. Knowing that I was coming today, he's prepared an entire pile of bushes for me to take back to England. He's laid these things out on a crocus bag, which he has placed on a rock outside the door to the hut located at the bottom of his farm. This is not where he sleeps. He lives in the village, but prepares his meals on a wood fire in the hut and takes his daily naps there. Take your medicine with you, he says. I know your granny must didn't boil enough of these when you're picnic. He picks them up one by one to tell me their names and usages, though I know some of them already. But all of these, all 21 of them, can be boiled together to make a potent mixture. Anyway, he adds, when you crush up all of them together, you won't even know which is which, but you will know, say, it's all there, and you will smell and taste the different ones then. Nerve whisk, which removes toxins from the blood, calms the nerves and cleans the liver. Cowfoot leaf, the muscle relaxant, relieves back pain. Marigolds is healing when used for growths, skin ulcers, and sores. It will also benefit me as a cleanser for the bloodstream. Dandelion is for strengthening the heart. John Charles is great for treating asthma. Boil nedgeweed with peanut trash and Medina, he instructs me, for a powerful nerve tonic. Wild plantain, the bush they call plantain in England, heals wounds and sores when used in baths and cures kidney problems. Velvet, almost as bitter as cerasee, is beneficial for hammering colds, he tells me, for pounding them out of the body. So is running crocus, which when you boil it is almost as red as your blood. Likewise, trumpet and cup and saucer are good cold bushes, and excellent for maintaining a strong immune system. Tanpan rock, otherwise known as consumption weed, is another immune system booster, and according to Congolin, increases the desire for frequent sex in both men and women. And there are sticks and roots, yellow stick, raw moon, and breadnut bark. A lot of these roots and herbs don't grow in backyard gardens, since they like the cool darkness of woodlands. Congolin is the type of person who will go looking for them in their habitat, trekking over hills to find the right ones. That's what you do when you're a country medicine man. That's what he did to gather a number of the bushes, wisses, and roots that are in this pile, and I'm humbled. But above all, what strikes me is the way he talks about plants, with love as if they were darlings. Eternal Father, Divine Mother, please give me the blessing and the gift to hear from the plants. Is a prayer he formulates every morning. The woman have a big role to play. You can't leave her out of the concept, he clarifies. For him, God is both male and female. He speaks of the plants whispering to him, and I'm curious about what this feels like. He describes it as experiencing the plant's joy, entering into a sort of empathy with them in which he can comprehend their emotions. Plants have feelings, he insists. You have to understand them if you're going to use them. You can't just use them based on your selfish longing. You have to really love the plants them if you want them to work. The plants them don't give the same power every day and the same time every day. Being a herbalist involves acknowledging the communicative nature of plants. While I've instinctively felt this since I was a child growing up with Mama, it's something I was never taught in my biology classes in high school. In fact, it seems to go against those lessons. Some might denounce this sort of thinking as anti-science. But this is the basis of Congolin's practice and of an entire relationship to plants, for him, but also for all those in the community who turn to him because of their beliefs. Is it possible to entertain the idea that plants also seek to communicate with us? This might mean entertaining the notion that Western science is not the only science that exists. I'm from a community of people who believe that things can speak, that our people have the ability to hear and understand their speech. It's this perspective that piques my curiosity about Congolin's insights. The scholar part of me wants to probe, what does the whisper sound like? How exactly do the plants whisper to you? The answer he provides offers no greater clarity than his previous statement. You have a complaint or a sickness within you, and I ask the Father for the knowledge to open my blind eyes. We've gone into the realm of the visual now, despite his assertion that the plants communicate through whispers, with him through whispers. But perhaps his answers can't be clarifying in the way I expect. As a poet, you know that sense perceptions are often fluid and untranslatable. And you often grope for the best image you can find to translate for your readers what you feel. It's often about approximations because, after all, we may occasionally see sound. We may even taste it. It's probably just impossible to translate dream language, just like for a poet, it's impossible to convey what you really feel, hear, and see. The attempt is made nevertheless. Certain things may not become clear today, if at all. I always give thanks to the Father, he continues, saying, give thanks for your great concept of healing. This is something I pray for, you know. I ask Father to bless me with great healing concept of herbs to heal the sickness in me. Then one of my time I get a vision, and my auntie me vision see, and she show me one bush. I have a certain sickness, and say, if you use this bush, and if it's good for me, it's good for others. And me use up the bush, rub it upon me. Anywhere me I feel pain, the pain diminish. Many stories of healing involve an episode such as this in which a dead loved one dreams the sick person and reveals to them what herbs they need to use and how. The dream might be a result of prayer, but it does seem that prayer may be broadly understood here, not necessarily as a request to the Christian God, but as a request to the ancestors and to the plants themselves. And almost what you talk out of your mouth, you know. Congolin reaches out to the plants themselves through the intensity of his yearning, plant telegraphy. For people like him who live and see between worlds, is this attentiveness and this yearning more powerful and precise than words that are reciprocated in the form of a dream? At night time when you're asleep, it's like your soul rise up out of your body if you go meet with the plant them. You could say that the plant dream is something that happens when the desires of the plant meet those of the person seeking its power. Favoring these encounters involves practicing certain attitudes, cultivating certain dispositions, he explains to me, but he is reticent to go into further details. Overall, Congolin's descriptions reflect an epistemology inherent to my upbringing, the fact that plants also have desire. His practice is based on a system which might be closer to Jamaican science than to Western science. He certainly has developed a method for his work. This science has meaning. It also has a history, if an unwritten one. Can I read a final paragraph, or is that? So in here, I then go on to talk about walking along the hillside with him and him pointing out different plants and their usages, and generally, giving me lessons. But I want to read this final paragraph to talk about, in visual terms, his plantation, what I call his peasant plantation, the plot of land, the small one that he cultivates. Congolin's own plot of land is an astonishment. To call it farmland is almost to mischaracterize it. It couches on the flank of an extremely craggy karst limestone hill, projecting rocks that stand erect in the earth like megaliths. Upon closer inspection, however, they appear as what they truly are, undersea rocks. I see the holes. Notice the pathways that water has created, holes running to where one cannot see. Sharp crevices and runnels in the white rock that gleams under the sun, dazzling the eyes. There are lots of them everywhere, and the slope is extremely steep. Climbing up and through Congolin's cultivations and periodically looking behind me at the steep drop below, I'm amazed at what he has done here. For many, this land would be considered uncultivable. I'm watching my step, anxious about pitching over the hillside all the way down into the wild tangle of lianas and untouched trees that conceal, perhaps, some chasm below me. I'm also trying to avoid stepping on the carrot shoots planted everywhere. Congolin walks with assured steps up and across the hillside on land that to me seems precarious, even dangerous. Where I want to watch my step moving gingerly to avoid pitching backwards and onto the pointed rocks beneath, he seems to eat up the hillside, taking no visible care about where and how he positions his feet. The tiny spaces between the rocks brim with cultivation. There is yellow and negro yam, banana, plantain, papaya, okra, sugar beans, and all sorts of trees, avocado, pimento, castor, guinep, and more, on this flank of the hill. I'd not have been able to imagine so many things growing here because of the sheer smallness, what to me is smallness, of the cultivable space. But Congolin forces me to see this space differently, to adopt a radically different vision of scale. For Congolin, this land is not forbidding. It's what is available to him and what's his privilege to work with, to live with. How long have I been reading, Lemara?
Never enough. But we shall take a brief interlude there, because
right.
you're going to close. Thank you, Jason. Honestly, I could hear you talk for so long, and I want to just bring it back before I get into like the main crux of our conversation about this author-editor relationship, because you have to imagine I get sent 1 million emails a day. 1 million is an exaggeration, and by agents who represent authors, and they want to sell me the book, right? Let's be real. But there was something when I started reading, and granted, it's grown from what I originally read, but there was a heartbeat of plants, of memory, of naming points in agriculture that I was oh so familiar with through my grandparents, who were peasant farmers, who owned land. And as I was listening to you again, I heard someone in the audience go, And it was that level of familiarity, that rhythm that I could already sense off the page. And I suppose my first question is then, why was it important for you to tell this history of Grung and to kind of put so much emphasis on the importance, the radical importance, the radical memory, and the healing of what the ground provides. Because in listening to Congolyn speak, it's this duality. It's, you know, like this stuff is real, but this all stuff is also really mythical. And to hear you grapple with his precision of his land and your kind of, your scaredness or your trepidation, why was it important to tell the history of this land through plants and other ways?
Yeah, well, without sounding, hopefully I don't sound pretentious in saying this, but I wanted to inscribe the Grung into literature. I feel I don't get the sense that this sort of landscape that I describe is necessarily considered worthy of literature, that is a worthy literary concern to talk about its visuals, its aesthetics, the very idea of speaking about something perhaps aesthetic, perhaps it's about speaking, perhaps the idea that I'm driving at is speaking about it in aesthetic terms, you know, speaking about it as something worthy of your viewership, of your viewing, of dwelling on it and talking about the people who work the ground, the people who work the soil, in a de-romanticized, non-romantic kind of tone and register, to talk about ground work, which is sometimes hard work, let's face it, right? It's not the sort of the bucolic idleness or the bucolic kind of rambling and roaming of the rambler, or neither is it the sort of the tale of the wonderful people, the wonderful simple people working the land. No, I wanted to talk about the complexity of these people. I wanted to talk about the complexity of peasant life. I wanted to talk about the complexity of these characters who come from such a complex history to have stewardship over this land. The very fact that they can have stewardship over this land is the outcome of a very tortuous and complex history, right? We're talking about a history of slavery. We're talking about peasant black people, black Jamaicans, or it tend to be black Jamaicans who come from a line of enslaved people who didn't have the land. They didn't have the access to a piece of earth to be them to sort of steward and to do with as they please. Now there is a kind of stewardship because the enslaved people did get tiny plots and they engineered the space, right? They did creative things with that little space, but this was still under bondage. So to talk about a peasant, a Rastaman, who doesn't have a flat space. It's not an easy space to cultivate. He's doing it amongst boulders, rocks. It's quite prohibitive. But it's his. He owns it. And there's the joy of the tenure of the land. I wanted to talk about that history. I want to talk about my grandmother, which is sort of like one of the stepping off points of this book, because the journey starts from Leeds. It starts from right here. I lived in Roundhay Park while I wrote this book. I've since moved to Chapeltown.
So, see, everyone's Jamaican when it comes to it, you know.
But I lived inside Roundhay Park in a place that I just ended up in by some weird, odd confluence of factors, you know. We could talk about that, but I ended up there in this place that I wasn't sort of questing to kind of live in a place like that. But I ended up there within the park, so on the edge of green space, and on the edge of the green space leads to woodland, and all of a sudden, there was a kind of shock, and the shock for me was having time all of a sudden. Whereas, you know, up to that point, I hadn't occupied a mental space that would allow for, that's my daughter, I don't know what she's up to. She's probably saying, I don't know what you're talking about.
What mental space were you occupying, Dad? That's what she's saying.
Yeah. I hadn't occupied a mental space since coming to this country, which I came to be a student, right? I came to do my doctorate. I came to this country. I came directly to Oxford. I did my doctorate there, and I was on this journey of my own of ascension. You know, back home we use the phrase often. Upward social mobility. I don't know if this is a phrase here, but you hear that, they drill that into you, upward social mobility. And I was on that journey, and I'd never factored in green space and roaming and that kind of, I can take my time. Oh, I can look around. I can think about land. I can think about green things growing, probably planting, what are these plants, and so on. But I'm saying that just to kind of bring it home that ignited the journey. Yeah. And this is the journey, this is the place that I begin the journey from. Even the book, in the first chapter, this is kind of like the contextualization to say, I'm going back. Yeah. You see what I mean? I'm going back to Jamaica, and it's Coffee Grove, which is this place in mountain central Jamaica, this hillside district, as we call the rural villages there, where I grew up. And the purpose of going back it was twofold, because I'm always, and I think this bears out in my writing as a larger picture, I'm trying to understand my journey, which is a thing that keeps on coming back. But specifically, I wanted to go back in search of what this place that nurtured me. And I began to understand that it shaped my creativity and my artistry. It shaped the artist that I am. It directly shapes my writerly concerns, the textures, the emotions, the affects, the kind of elements that reoccur in my work. This closeness to ground, to the earth, to intimacy. What does it mean to have intimacy and kinship with the soil? What does it mean to, as an adult, lean back into perhaps something that you felt you had as a child, or probably you were close to, that sort of sensuality and the tactility and the joy, I think, of being in a world that is wholesome, where you have contact with your own, wholesome in all the ways you can imagine, right? So then, can I ask a question? Of course. Because you know I talk a lot.
We're not even imagining you guys here. Do you know what I mean? This is the epilogue. Jason, man, it's there's so much. But in that last bit which you said, I want to talk then about the title. If you're talking about this return to joy, to softness, to understanding this place which shaped you, to kind of seeing it as more than a spark plug, the aux cord, the genesis of who you are, particularly when you're in nature here. And we went to Roundhay Park today, and I said, bloody hell, look at space. I live in London. I go to Richmond Park occasionally. That's pretty decent. But Roundhay Park, let me tell you, it's massive for no reason. I was so...
Because it's Leeds, right?
Because it's Leeds.
Come on, that's naughty of you.
The north scares me. But my thing is in that you're then in this place, and it's causing you to recollect where you once come from and ask this question, well, can this be a possibility of tenderness? So I want to talk to you about the title. I see it as an instigation as much as an invitation, right? And I love the way it rolls in your mouth. The possibility of tenderness. You can almost imagine yourself walking down the street thinking, could this make me soft? Could this make me approachable? Can this make me tender? But it wasn't always that title. So talk to me about how it came to you, how it connects to this childhood Jason, and why it stuck to be on the front of the book.
Yes, as I love the point that it wasn't the title at all. It came in pretty late in the journey, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was grung. We floated with the idea of grung at one point, but that didn't really stick. I think we sold it as Scanning the Bush,
yes.
which refers to
yes.
a particular chapter in
yes.
the thing. But I love the possibility of tenderness, if I may say so myself. I think it's a good
Jason
title.
Came up with that himself. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, okay, we'll see at the end if it sticks. And everyone, I said, he's come up with this title, The Possibility of Tenderness, and it made people stop. And they said, now that's a question that needs answering. So yeah, go on, my friend.
I think you're always digging your memory with these things, right? To try to remember, when did I come up with that? But I think it was a time when I was thinking about softness. I was thinking about soft life. I was thinking about what does it mean to step out of the narrativization of our lives, to sort of the black life and black living always being told from a standpoint of suffering, of pain, of oppression. And I begin to think, no, we proceed from spaces, and we know those spaces that are deeply empowering, right? Powerful spaces, the spaces where we know the kind of the sort of intimacies, the sorts of that's with us, those intimacies that keep us that keep us. We have safe spaces, we have spaces of community. I think one of the safe spaces in my life is the soil, is the ground, is the earth. Hence, this locale and wanting to make a portrait of it and of its people. To think about what has been, but also I think Coffee Grove gives a template of an alternative kind of life, and it's not like necessarily a simple before and after, or going back to, it's not like a linear kind of thing where it's before and after and going back, but I wanted a different narrative. I wanted to dwell, for myself to dwell in a different story of what it means to be a black man in Britain. So I'm saying, like, I come from some powerful people.
Yeah.
I come from some powerful sources. The grounds I have walked, those people, let us look at them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
big up.
DJ Sensation, yeah, big up. Big up. Love to see you come into the room.
Jamaica to the world,
and
always.
all my people come into the room. I wanted to tell that story and the possibility of tenderness, because so often we get trapped in the cycles of reactivity as black people. Racism, Toni Morrison has talked about this.
Listen, the very distraction, the very function, of racism is a distraction.
Yeah.
Come on.
And I was channeling that quote and that viewpoint because I really see it. I really, really deeply believe that you get as sort of, I don't know what the term is, the targets of racism then can get trapped in a kind of reaction time. You're responding to provocations, to hurt, to whatever, to anger. There's a lot of there's a lot of that. But I didn't want to write a book that was about anger.
And I remember, do you remember, off-piece, the questions will come. Do you remember you gave me a call once and you were like, Lemara, read the blurb they're trying to put on the book, or they want me to amp up this anger bit and they want me to write this. And I said, but that's not what your book's about.
No.
We're not obscuring that, but that's not what the book
Yes.
is about.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to kind of pigeonhole it as
easy.
that.
Yeah.
But everything in the text was given us not that. If I may ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, go on.
Because you're talking of this tenderness, you're talking of resilience, you're talking about a beautiful portrait of people. And I'm going to say it like this. As you're now right to have the language to call it tenderness, it makes me think of Mama, who is such essential, more than character, who is an epoch, who is the beginning, who is a tender soul. And I wanted to kind of ask in a round...
She's fiery as well, you know.
She's fiery.
Yeah.
And more bossy and fiery. As she's the driving force and the heartbeat of this book, it makes me reframe the word resilience and perseverance and look more at her solitude, and her dreams for you. So in kind of trying to connect, if you can call it tenderness, what do you think Mama would have called it in the act of her going to the ground every day, of carrying you on her back up Jakoto Hill to the post office? Would she have viewed it at that? And what language do you give her acts?
That's a beautiful question. And to be quite blunt about it, I doubt Mama might have called this something tenderness. Because when I look back on her journey, which I talk about at length in this, I talk about her life, I realized that she bore the cost of my happiness and our happiness as a family, my mother's and mine, because she'd endured a difficult life. She also comes from a line of women who'd endured quite a lot of hardness, including when it comes to the men in their lives. And by the time I came around into the picture, I wasn't mature enough, old enough to understand all that she'd had to go through to perhaps enable the kind of space that she created for me, for perhaps enable my thriving, my happiness. And so writing this book was also like an exercise in understanding. And the more I write about her, the more I grow in empathy, not just for her, but for my mother, whom I talk about in the book as well, within the general context of familial relationships and hurts and all of that. Because, you know, as a younger, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, everybody in the room can appreciate this, as a younger person, you don't have the full picture, you know. You have certain resentments.
100%.
And you can't, and so writing this book, I feel it was a way of going towards them towards her in that way as well. Yes, I grew in understanding the person she was. But I will add this. I think she had vision, you know. I think she had a broad picture. And I think that's why she invested in us the way she did. She was a very smart woman. And not just street smarts, but she had brain smarts as well. She had the equivalent of a grade 9 education. If any older folks here are here from Jamaica and who might be familiar with, I think they call it third Jamaica local. Anyway, I just love that phrase, third Jamaica local. I don't know what it sounds very colonial.
My mom's always telling me about O-levels. What are O-levels? Yeah, see? Yeah. What are those?
Yeah. Well, can I say I did O-levels, so...
Did you? Oh, sorry, Jason. Oh, no. Yeah, no. I just about did some GCSEs, guys.
Anyway, yeah, go on, yeah. You're young.
I tried to be.
what was I saying? I was saying that
She had
she was
vision.
smart.
She had
was
vision.
she was the village administrator. She was like the de facto
Yes.
mayor. She signed everybody's papers. She carried people to get their passports. She was the because I grew up in a village where many people didn't know how to. A lot of people didn't know how to read and write. Right, in that peasant community. But she had the blackboard there on the veranda. You know, that's in my earliest memory. This massive blackboard that took up the entirety of the veranda, blocking the door to the entrance to the house. That is like a core memory. That massive blackboard there, and that's how I learned to read and write and so on. And she constantly talked about education. She constantly she was able to communicate a love of learning. There weren't a lot of books in the home. Because we're just that kind of family that didn't have a lot of books. But there were a few books. There was the Bible.
Of course. In every room of the house.
There was the Bible. There were some hymnals. And
see, I hear them. People know.
Yeah.
Let me not make a joke about
If
that.
anybody has heard Derek Walcott, one of the affinities with Derek Walcott is how he talks about his introductions to poetry, and he talks about the hymnals. He grew up a Methodist. And the hymns, he says, it was the first thing that taught him, or at least one of the first things.
Yeah.
Obviously, he talks a lot about the sea, but this, in this mythical way. But he does talk about those hymns, and they teach meter, right?
Yeah.
In environments where we didn't have a lot of books. So she was able to communicate those sorts of things, and I don't know, I can't articulate it, but I think she had a vision. I know she had a vision for something that I could become.
It makes me think, and it's an extension of that question, because she's such a central factor. And I implore you, if you haven't met Mama, you're going to spend so much time with her. You're probably going to want your own version of Mama in your life. And if you don't mind me asking this question, in what way is the book your debt paid back to her? It made me think of all the elders that you talked to in the book. Was it your opportunity to talk to Mama again and have those conversations and really kind of like hail her up and thank her through those interactions, and then looking at her life and how it's impacted you? Was that your way of saying thank you?
Some of that. Like I said, I really wanted to... This was an impulse. This was a project. This was a thing. I wanted to write this landscape in a book in a way that I'd never seen it before. It's as simple as that when it comes. I wanted to make literature out of this material, out of this, and that, the term material, but these lives. More directly to Mama, and these other elders that you talk about as well. I wanted to make a portrait of her. Yes, I think it's kind of a repayment of a debt. There is a substrate of guilt in the book that readers might pick up on, surely, that I wasn't around in that final year when she was ill and was about to die. I was busy. I was in Oxford, guys, and I was reinventing myself, and how that goes. And I think I wasn't able to. That guilt of not being around haunted me, and I feel perhaps the journey of the book is also a way of finishing something left unfinished. So I'm having conversations with her, Yeah. I go to the grave and I have conversations with her. But I'm sorry if that sounds macabre, but I'm also having conversations with her just walking the walks we walked, I'm having conversations with her in the house. I think writing can be such a way of having conversations.
I'm hearing you. There's two.
You write it. You're writing. The process of writing is that intimate space where you can call up people.
100%.
You know, it's really that gesture of, I think wanting to do some duty.
Yeah.
You're going into memory. You're growing in understanding. The process of writing helps you to understand what you couldn't have understood before. What do I write about? Something about in going into that house, the interior of the home.
The dresser wrapped in
Yeah.
the tarpaulin and the dresser.
I write to
her English dresser.
You know, it's about these traces that you keep on finding only through the act of writing. I think there's something very special about that was able to give me this sense of closeness, if not resolution. I don't think I was necessarily looking for resolution. Probably I'd come to that before, but I needed to go back, you know. I needed to go back, and I needed some kind of contact, and perhaps through that means, I can feel a kind of uplift.
God, there's so much. There's this saying, right? You know, we're familiar with it. Jamaica isn't a real place. A lot of places in the Caribbean are not real places when you see some of the things. But
All of them.
But when you consider the kind of the goings on and all the people there, there's this magical and mythical quality, right? And in saying that, I want you to kind of expand. You mentioned in the writing to Mama, I talk about Mama's duppy in this question, and you introduce us to Congolyn, Mrs. Ivy, the composite of the people at the barbecue who you're just liming with after coming from your mum's house. Talk to me about the people you encountered and kind of this balance of rendering them real, magical and mythical, because you're playing with a lot here. And in speaking about that ability to kind of understand the land and communicate plants at the same time, they're balancing two worlds for me, and they can say to you a sentence looking in your eye clear as day, but it's got some otherworldly quality behind it. And I think you grapple with that as the pages go on, and it lands essentially as fact and sense, if that makes sense.
I'm trying to make sense of it, to be honest, but I hear you. I think it's probably something that I'm not entirely conscious of in writing it. But meeting a cross-section of generations was fun, because there's plenty of jokes, you know. There's plenty of jokes, you know, including things for me that are funny, that are just waking up to go on an early walk, and you reach somebody's yard at 8 o'clock and you smell rum on the bread already, you know, because they've been going at it from the early morning. And just, it's one of the, the different moments of humor. I find humor in the names that people give each other.
Yeah.
Like Money Man.
Yeah.
Even Congolyn. Where the hell does that come from? You know, so, and that's interesting as well, because you can tell, you know, to me, it seems obvious that it's Congo and it's trying to link with some African mythology or some
But even in the
like
plants,
ancestry,
right? The alternative name from the plants of this.
Oh, the names of the plants. Right. Consumption weed.
Yeah.
What's the one that can treat impotence? Inflation weed.
Inflation weed.
You know, the plant names are storytelling.
Yeah.
You know? And I was purposive in not using the Latin botanical names. I was very intentional about that. I wanted the folkloric names because I wanted a sense of the space to be there. Some of them you can actually find on Google, refreshingly. Like you type in the Jamaican names and it comes up on Google. I was like, wow, okay, we're going, AI and all of that. It's 2025, yeah. We can find Jamaican words.
You can find them, because if we think about kind of what's the word I'm trying to think? Not the commodity, but the need, the demand for kind of wanting herbs and stuff from ground and land to come into Western production. It's vogue.
Yeah. Yes,
it's vogue.
So that's a moment now.
It's a moment,
that we're in.
yeah.
People are getting back to the soil. They're getting back to
wanting to reap the benefits medicinally, as we have been doing for years. But now? Yeah.
So I was interested in the story, the way in which you find stories dotted along the land itself, because each place name beckons some possible story of what happened there. I feel that I was thinking about an alternative kind of mapping, that you can map a place through the intimacies of the stories that people tell about the land. So there's a sort of like internal mapping. There's a sort of internal map that any people, any community who are very intimately connected with a space have. If you're not intimately invested in your space, as in the ground, as in the earth, then you probably won't have that. You won't have that storytelling. You won't have that folklore. But if you're intimately linked, including ancestrally to your land, if your people are buried on that ground, if from generation to generation this is your land, with the dead and the living, then it's a storytelling emerges, because that's part of the way you know the earth. It's part of the way you become intimate with the space.
There's two things there which arise from that question. You make me think of, there's a moment where you go to, it's not the Jamaican National Archives, but one of them with Dr. Edna. And she asks for a cadastral map, and then the teller or the clerk behind the desk says, you say, I want a cadastral map. She says, why do you want a cadastral map? Because she want a cadastral map?
No, she said, what do you know about cadastral map?
What do you know about a map? So Jamaican, anti. Yeah. And it makes me think about that land because I want to talk about not so much the craft of writing, but the craft of finding the real history of that place, right? You've added the humanness, the folklore, the isms and schisms, but there's a history of Coffee Grove which you find going into those archives and those maps. Yeah.
There's a history of Coffee Grove. In fact, I learned the fact that Coffee Grove was a coffee plantation worked by slaves from the late 18th century. I discovered that my district was a coffee plantation in the archives. I didn't know that before. I didn't know that. And one would think I might have inferred, the place is called Coffee Grove. It's kind of...
But then you don't know if that's just people giving it a name.
But I'm thinking, a lot of places are named this grove and Pear Tree Grove and whatever, because I was just thinking it's just somebody naming it because there's a lot of coffee grown up there, and I'm thinking, it is a fertile coffee grove. But to realize that the ground I grew up in was an actual slave plantation, not just that it was a coffee plantation, but I could find the letters patent delivered to the first planter, the name of the first planter who got these letters painted is called Hutchison, not Hutchinson. Hutchinson. I don't know if the Hutchinsons was a kind of evolution, the placement of the N. But anyway, he's a man from Ayr in Scotland, and I find all this biographical information on him and on his children. And to be able to read this document from 1796, I believe, with this this language from George III, of Jamaica king and of Jamaica and king and of Ireland this and no of some another king and of Ireland this and of Jamaica this. I'm reading this this actual letter in an archive in Kingston, and I'm saying this is where I'm from. This is my place that I grew up in. And to suddenly be able to situate that within a broader, it all of a sudden becomes a broader global history, because you then begin to find the crop returns, you then begin to find the conveyances of when he died, and then it had to, through his attorneys, had to go through to his children and whatnot. And it's a history that begins to form. A history of coffee growing in Jamaica and of my mountainside district as a very important district in Jamaica for coffee growing, which was one of the major producers at the time, Jamaica, in when coffee became a bourgeois habit in Britain. So to be able to understand and to unpack those things whereby the local and the familiar history becomes global, and to be able to connect the place where I grew up to the world that I currently inhabit, those were parts of the exhilarating aspects of writing the book for me.
And kind of the second part of my question, it's almost, it kind of comes full circle. I'm thinking here of you then writing the rightful, not even alternative history of Coffee Grove, right? Through a portrait of its people. But this worth of land, of how the land came to be acquired. And I'm reminded constantly of this conversation you have with your mum, where she's talking about the parcels of the land, which are a bit jaggedy here, jaggedy there. And you say to her, well, you must buy this land from so-and-so to make your piece whole. And I suppose I'm looking at it now in this time through these eyes of that actual reclamation of our land, of connecting it back again and having that ownership. I wonder if you think about that.
Yeah. Can I have your water?
Of course you can. I ain't drunk that, man. Even if I did, we're family. Go on.
Sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Peppermint tea. And I'm going to get you to think about that. And then in just a brief second or two, we'll open for questions. So please start thinking, formulating.
Yeah, I'll be brief about it. I think I'm in...
You sure?
Yeah, man, I can be.
Joke, man. Joke.
It's which Shakespearean play where him say... Anyway, let me know.
See it there? What Shakespearean play? And now
anyway,
I'm intrigued.
something about I'll be brief. Anyway,
Does anyone know?
No,
No.
I need to... I don't know, something is coming into my head, but it's not quite there yet. Yeah, land reclamation. Yeah, this is where I'm at. Because of all the concerns, I begin to see the importance of land,
Right.
of having it.
Right.
Jamaica is a place where you can buy land, just buy the land. You just buy a piece of land. If you can afford it, you can buy a piece of land. If you don't already have land in your family, you can aspire to own a piece of land. And it's just, what I'm thinking of is obviously all the things that come with that, and that's the point of it, all the things that come with that is, you can cultivate, you can grow things, you can begin if you didn't have a generational lineage, of land. You have something to give to your children. There's one thing I see in Jamaica. I've perceived that we're into having land. Having a piece of land is an important thing.
Place to call your
It's
own.
adjacent to having it's adjacent to having a house. You see, yes, you can buy a house, but a lot of people, it's ingrained in our psyche to have a piece of land. And it's with everything that's happening now, a lot of people are thinking about food independence. The prospect of being able to grow my own food, of not having to depend on neoliberal globalized food chains, right? Which in those to be fair, in those locations, it's not like a distant prospect, or it's already so live and so connected. But and perhaps because of that, but people from town want land. People from Montego Bay want land. People from country want more land. And it's not, yes, there are pernicious sides to that. There's a lot of, there's development culture, like in Jamaica, like elsewhere. But a lot of it is still stemming from that urge, that yearning for a kinship with the soil, I think. So I think it's just where we're at. Yeah.
And that's why I say it's full circle, because it takes me back to Mama planting yams, making sure the sticks are right, Congolese with what I would regard as like uneven topography, navigating that land and growing so much here and there. And it was funny, in my own life, in about 2020, I nearly got stranded in Grenada. It wasn't funny, but it was the eve of lockdown. And I was driving around the island, and all the talk was, orderly queues at the supermarket, people, you got to do this. And the driver said, I'm not worried about that. He said, look around you. Grenada is one big garden. Why are we worried about what the supermarket has when we have it, right? Are people ready with questions? I'm going to ask my final one. Okay, wicked. And it's one you didn't answer the other day in Brixton, so I'm giving it to you again. Yeah, I remembered. In
All right, go on.
yeah. In the book, you say, my people are folks who believe that if good moments happened, you better leave them where they are. Was there a fear of emotions that would resurface through the reliving of memories? My folks are a people of silence and willed forgetting. And I want to pose that question to you now, as a published author of this book and other books. The moments you remember from this and what you hold on to. And I kind of say it as an encouragement to never forget. But what that question now makes you feel in regards to your life and your publishing.
So the moments I hold on to. Can you say the last part again?
Yeah. Well, no, I can't remember that, mate. So we're just gonna go off the top. But basically, you say your people are folks who believe that if good moments happen, you better leave them where they are.
Yes.
That's not you, though, Jason. So in light of all that's come,
yeah, that's
how
not
you're breaking that.
So I think there's been a kind of trajectory, some kind of evolution, where somehow I am the one who wants to poke beneath the silence.
I like that.
Somehow I am the one who wants to confront the silences.
Yeah.
And that's important. It's important because that gives us a pathway forward that you can't understand the shadow if the shadow is still hovering there. You have to speak to that shadow.
It's true.
You have to confront it. So I think I relish the joys. I confront the pains as much as I relish the joys, and you can hold both together in tandem. You can confront the pain. You realize what strengthens you, what can make you stronger, because understanding makes you stronger. Yeah? And it liberates you. So that's why I no longer am afraid to talk about this ground. I no longer am afraid to talk about the things that are are not necessarily pretty.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of joy there as well, You can't write a book that's only about the hard things. And our lives is not only about hard things, far, far from it. I think readers will find a lot of joy in this book. And even elation.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree. Jason, we're gonna hail you up right now. We're gonna clap to say thank you for. We're not done. We're not done. But I just wanna. Yeah, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We're gonna take a few questions, and then you're gonna grace us with a final reading. And the time is just the time. Are there any questions? How does this work? I can give people the mic, or how's everyone? Yeah. Okay. I'm coming up. Wow, my legs don't work.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Lemara. Wonderful event. So my question is, as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing Kai Miller's A Cartographer Tries to Map a Way to Zion. I'm hearing Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. I'm hearing Roots. I'm hearing and seeing in my head pictures of Charmaine Watkins's The Wisdom Tree and the resistance uses by black women throughout history of plants. What are the ghost texts that lay behind the possibility of tenderness?
Glad.
That's a fire question.
Thank you.
That's a beautiful question.
Lemar is so funny. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Romy. Hello. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you've asked. You know, there are several of the ones that you've mentioned that are part of it. Alice Walker, Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching God. The work of Christina Sharp in Ordinary Notes. The work of Saidiya Hartman, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. The work of Erna Brodba, the Jamaican sociologist and novelist. The work of Olive Senior, the Jamaican poet and novelist, Lorna Goodison. Sylvia Wynter, the theorist, the philosopher, the Jamaican theorist and philosopher. But also some faces that people probably might not suspect. The Nobel laureate and French writer, help me here, Shame or Annie Ernaux. Annie Ernaux really influential in how to write the intimacy of family, the navigation of shame, the transformation of shame, the transcendence of shame, the reckoning with shame, but also the transcendence of it. How to write a neglected place, a place that's considered lowly, how to rewrite an unliterary place into literature. Edouard Louis. Edouard Louis was a big influencer. Has been accompanying me since my days studying in Paris. I was struck by this writer and his ability to just sort of like come out and talk about shame and talk about how do I want to put this? Edouard Louis is kind of like, we were talking, I think the way I want to bring it back to that kind of conversation, that kind of discussion of naming the shadow, you know, naming the shadow, that kind of, also, and they're influenced by Bourdieu, the French sociologist, so it's this kind of way of bringing a set of concerns into literature that are not easily accommodated in literature, that are not easily talked about, right? Those kinds of lives that are kind of marginal or not necessarily literary, except when they're depicted through a kind of the kind of like, you know, industrialization, you know, as in Dickens, or, you know, through a kind of where they're used in the service of the plot, you know. But where now we're talking about writers who are making them the central character, right? The focus, right? The heartbeat, and talking about those interior lives as, making them protagonists, and the dignity of those lives. So those provided templates for me in how to write The Grung and how to write Mama all together. So those are some of the works. Yeah.
There's another question. I know you had your hand up. All right.
I'd like to find out from you, how did Mama's spirituality influence you to take the journey you took? Taking on board her indigenousness.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for the question. Spirituality. Yeah, I need to speak into the mic here. Spirituality. No, I can't think about Mama without thinking about her spiritual and the kind of spiritual connection, the kind of spiritual, shall we say, inheritance that she's given me. It's that that sense of, I guess, sense of God, really, the sense of the creator being the larger picture, but also how it holds us, how that force holds you, I think is more what I think about. How, whatever they, I'm no longer in the Church of God that Mama raised me in, but I've kept that sense of a universe that I think is fundamentally benevolent and that wants to hold you. That there are forces, there are also people who have come before me that are looking down, that are looking at me, the ancestors who are carrying me, and that they're always there. I think it's something that has been very essential to me, even coming to this country and navigating Oxford, navigating my life here, and the system, and the journey to where I am. So yeah, the songs, the vibrations, the energies of also a potent woman. A woman who has a strong sense of vision, a strong sense of her connection to that plant world, to that. She was a seer woman. Not a seer woman in the sense that she didn't have a barnyard, or she didn't practice because she was in the Church of God. So she could, but she had what people might call a third eye, and I think that gave her a sense of grounding and a sense of surety, which I think she communicated to me. Does that answer the question?
European authors, but I wanted to find
a lot of the. You mean in addition to the local,
yes,
the
I
authors?
wanted to know what influenced you from her indigenous belief systems, which she would have integrated with the Church of God stuff. How did that influence you when you got stuck in some of the concepts you might have been pursuing?
Yeah. How like the Church of God background influenced me in the.
No, her energy.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a nice question. So because of a lot of this book, so I've spoken about authors. I've spoken about authors like Anyano and Philippe. I've spoken about Broadbuff Senior and so on. But a lot of the the knowledge and the grounding of this book comes from the local people. So that's the answer. That's the answer I would give, is that she reminded me that there is a science, there's a knowledge, there's a depth of knowledge and epistemology that comes from her and from people like her who are close to the ground, who work the ground, you know? So that it was like something I was very conscious about. So I'm writing back, I'm going back to, as part of what I'm doing, is gathering oral histories. A lot of this scaffolding, a lot of the armature of this book is oral history, is what comes from the mouth of the people themselves. And I wanted to raise that up to the level of a book, you know. I wanted to give that its space as well as ground and grounding of knowledge. As Congolin would put it, beautiful, something, vision of madness or something. No, that's a side quote. But the beautiful, he's talking about herbs. That's a sort of a side point that I shouldn't bring in. Yeah, let it stay there. The ground, the ground of. I'm just trying to remember a quote, and I'm not bringing it up. But do you see what I mean? That earthing, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Hi, my name's Monique. Nice to meet you.
Monique.
So my stepdad is also from Jamaica, from Mandeville, and I spent a lot of my childhood in Cayman. And something I've picked up from your conversation with Lenora, and and the first bit of your chapter is the way you describe the fruit, and just I've noticed it in Audre Lorde's book, in The Spelling of My New Name, and in Bernadette Evaristo's book, in Mr. Loverman, in the way that the Caribbean and Jamaica has a very, like, it's very, in the physical space, in the way that it's very easy to take in your senses. And did you find, for however long you were away from Jamaica, either just before or just as you were starting to write this book, did you find it really easy or very difficult? Like, oh, I don't have to search for it. Like, I know exactly what this looks like, and I know exactly what this tastes like, and I know exactly what this smells like. Or no, yeah. Sorry.
No, I had to go back. I don't know if I would have been able to do it. Probably it would have been the texture of the book would have been different. But I find that going back rekindled the sensations. It brought back smell and the immediacy of smell. And smell would then reconstruct an atmosphere for me. Then it brought back, obviously, sound, which is also a big thing in the book, right? Talk about names and the cadences and the storytelling. And it obviously brought back sight. Sight, I think, is the easiest sense to conjure in my experience. It's the easiest at a distance to write about. I find sound and smell harder. I felt like being in situ enveloped me it made the sensations so immediate. And I think what that does is that it influences perhaps the texture, the pacing of the writing, because I'm literally like writing in the place, and I feel I'm writing on the go, and there is a kind of urgency to capture the immediacy of the sensations. Yeah.
I got one. Is it a quick one? No, we're not quick. Because Jason, you want to read. You ready to read?
Yeah.
He wants to read. We've got to let him read. It's his book launch. All right, there's one here, then one quick one. Notice how I said quick? Both of them are quick.
Thank you so much for that, Jason, because as you read your section at the beginning, it took me right back to my father, who came to England in the 50s, and he never, ever stopped talking about the land. And we had a small garden, and he would plant all sorts of things. And we felt as children he was obsessed with the land. And then when he went back to Jamaica 50 years later, we realized why. He just couldn't keep away from it. And so your book is very timely. And I don't think anybody else has written it. And I'm quite sure, when you talked about categories earlier, there must be a lot of questions about what category does this come into. Yeah. It's very timely, because I've always felt that we ought to pay tribute to the land that our ancestors mined. So I would like to ask you then, is there a question that you would have liked to have asked Mama that you didn't ask? Because all of us who've lost relatives have those questions once they've gone, and we can't actually ask them. Yeah. So that's my question. Is that brief enough?
Yeah.
No comment.
Thank you so much for that.
That's beautiful, though. That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much for that comment and the question. There are several. There are several. Do I have to pick one? In the interest of time. I think that, okay, I'll tell you the question, because I'm just not over I'm thinking of the first question that comes to my mind. Why did you leave the man, your partner, who you were totally in love with, and his children, and join the Church of God to get married to that man that they foisted upon you? That's what I would ask her.
It's another book. Keep me employed, Jason. All right. Well, this is the last one, and then you're going to read. You still want to read?
Yeah, I'll read a bit.
He's going to read a bit, and then we're going to sign, and I know you're going to ask him more questions, and then this is it. No pressure.
I know,
I'm joking. Take your time.
Hi, Jason. This is I'm glad I tried to make it tonight, because it's the second time I hear you speaking about this book. And what came to mind when you were talking about, is it Coffee Grove? Sorry.
Coffee Grove.
Coffee Grove being an ex-plantation, and you've done some archival research. Did you ever come across any information about the impact that enslaved Africans in Jamaica had on modern medicine in Britain at the time? Because I read something, it was some time ago in 2007, that there was an information exchange as well as knowledge exchange as well as appropriation of what enslaved Africans were doing with herbal plants in Jamaica at the time. And British doctors had visited Jamaica to do this research and then took some of that information back, because particularly the Maroons as well were quite adept at using plants to cure infections, which was not something at the time that Europeans had made any advance in. And I don't know if you came across any of that, because when you spoke about Coffee Grove being an explantation and talking about walking in the footsteps of people who are quite powerful, that was what came to mind. And I don't know if you come across that.
No, it resonates. I think I've heard stuff about that, but there's nothing really present to mind right now. I do talk about the Maroons quite a bit in the book. And beyond the Maroons per se, I do talk about that, the relationships that enslaved people had with the land and with ecology as a result of the enslavement and the sort of like escape mechanisms that were linked with the ecology and with the landscape, with this particular landscape of ours. But no, it's not something that I kind of majored on. But yeah, that's certainly. It resonates, and it's something that I want to look into more. The medicinal, the kind of like transference that you talk about. Yeah. Shall I read a little bit to close out?
Okay with everyone? No one's got nowhere to be. I know there's more questions. You can ask Jason at the table, but if everyone's okay, he reads.
I will read from the shortest chapter in the book, which is chapter 3. That's called Quiet Bonds. Okay, 5 minutes. 5 minutes is one page. um, okay, let's start here. If the soundscape of my childhood is defined by silence, it must also be because of the muteness produced by accumulated hurt. There's not a lot of dialogue in the memories. There's not a lot of dialogue in the memories I have of my childhood. No conversations at the dinner table, no teasing between siblings, no squabbles between parents, no banter between a parent and their siblings who've come to visit. The very notion of family coming to visit was foreign to the world I knew. Come to think of it, there wasn't much discourse in my life either in the period after I moved with my mother. It's hard for me to conjure up snippets of teasing, of kidding around, of throwaway dialogue with her. There's a particular reason for this. The moments of levity that create dialogue, the kind of dialogue that one imagines in a novel or in the atmospheric parts of a film, were rare, if not absent. But isn't the reason for this absence, at least a part of it, the fact that my mother was also alone? Alone in a more brutal way than my grandmother. My mother had difficult relationships with men, much like Mama before her. She raised both her children, me and my sister Charlene, born 12 years after me, alone. This aloneness of women is something that runs through the generations of my family, going back to the 19th century to the decades after slavery, to a period in our family about which only scattered bits of information have been passed down. According to my mother, Mama's mother, my great-grandmother, and her baby father's sister once shared the same man, wittingly or unwittingly. I do not know. Wittingly or unwittingly, I do not know. This lasted for a while. This great-grandmother, Auntie Bus by name, had around 8 children, some dying within months after birth. So many different fathers, but the fathers' names are not written on the birth certificates of the children. Perhaps the difficulty of making up a family tree, any kind that would do justice to the concept of family tree, lies also in that fact. I look for the men of my family and for their names in my memory and find but few. Stories of the women abound. The men have been scattered. They are absent. Some are, no doubt, the husbands of other women, women who run stable families, families that are nuclear, the stain of the outside children ignored, unacknowledged. The children were illegitimate. I was illegitimate. The women in my family have illegitimate children, like me. They have always had, except Mama, in her marriage with that man who had a fault. Shame is a silent emotion. The sound of shame is silence. Shame stills the fluency of speech and of laughter. Yet Mama protected me. Only now do I understand the silence. I had always known that my silence was more complex than bucolic. It was not the silence of the heath and the moors, which I discovered in the novels of Thomas Hardy. There was always something more complex below its surface. I was protected. Yet my protection came at some cost I didn't know about, that I didn't have to know about, because by the time I came around, my grandmother had resolved to make the most of being alone. I'm grateful for my silent green childhood protected by both Mama and the bush. I want to know who were the first black settlers here, the first black people to purchase land in Coffee Grove. You know, after slavery and all that, I mentioned to Miss Carmen. Mommy jumps in. Yes, I was just telling him what you told me. I know your father didn't own the land from here, so go right back down to Mama. The spread of territory Mommy references includes a bit that was Mama's, now hers. Carmen nods, confirming. Stanley Williams, my grandfather, a him sell Mother Sill, Mama's neighbor, and her husband the land. Him own whole heap of land up here, so. His original name was Bowles, Miss Carmen explains, but he would have some mix-up in Ellen Street where he was from, and Runway come to Coffee Grove and buy up a lot of land. As Carmen unveils the story of her grandfather's journey, I'm left wondering, how did a man facing troubles elsewhere manage to reinvent himself and amass such wealth in a new district? Ellen Street? But not there somewhere that they come from? Mommy exclaims, her eyes wide with excitement. That's my father's natal district. Her knowledge of his background is sketchy at best, presumably not because it's a secret, but rather because such matters were rarely discussed in those days. Once again, I face the muteness, a learned and practiced silence, particularly of the emotional world, that gets locked behind a seldom if ever opened door. Again, this has everything to do with our history. It was easy to speak about work and toil, about the practical matters of eating and staying alive, but not about feelings, heritage, and kinship. I can't help but wonder whether this muteness has to do with how Daddy Joe, Mama, and my other ancestors viewed their relationship with their space, with the way they conceived of their bodies within the spaces they occupied, as mere sojourners, people being kept alive, people living by default, rather than, say, individuals who had a rightful claim to their space, who deserved to leave their imprint upon it, who had a right to their own inner world. And yet, as I've mentioned, I sense that my people have led such a rich life of the imagination. It must have been their source of resilience amid the horrors, hardships, and dehumanization they faced during slavery and its aftermath. But it wasn't very easy for them to place that inner life of the imagination into words. It seems words are always what fail under the effect of trauma. The least one can say is that both trauma and resilience have left their mark on my family. I go on a little bit about this, and I will read the, develop some of those. And I'll just read the final paragraph or 2 paragraphs of this, because I'm conscious of time. Where is time? Where? While there's a deeper narrative waiting to be unearthed, filled with intricate details that remain beyond our reach, the question, I'll just read the whole thing because there's not much left. Yeah, because, let's just go down the line.
Do what you
The
will,
least one
Jason.
can say is that both trauma and resilience have left their mark on my family. Daddy Joe's ancestors, it appears, belonged to the Ellen Street clans who settled in the hillsides between Coffee Grove and Mount Pleasant. They were part of the peasantry supporting estates like the Whitney Plantation, which thrived in this area of North Manchester and Clarendon until the early 20th century. Many of these estates have been unnamed to us until now, raising questions about the countless others we've never heard of. Plantations cultivating coffee, hidden from our school textbooks. History, close yet obscure. There's so much that I hope to find in the archives, but gleaning a people's history of the land is equally vital. The journey begins here and now, I reassure myself, even if it entails long hours of walking, asking, looking, and asking again. Many trips from England, painstakingly slow but steady work. Already, my mother and I are peering at Ellen Street through a new lens. Miss Carmen and my mother speculate that these individuals, my mother's paternal grandmother, known only by her nickname Ma Minky, along with Carmen's grandmother and others, likely arrived here in the late 1800s. Carmen begins to narrate, explaining the many residents of Ellen Street in South Manchester, migrated to Coffee Grove, seeking employment at the Whitney Estate, a significant sugar and coffee plantation that still thrived in the latter part of the 19th century. My mother seems surprised by this revelation. Carmen paints a picture of hardship, food scarcity, and a struggle for economic survival during that era. Ellen Street, it seems, was just one of the places from which people journeyed to this small community, which now stands as the centerpiece of my destiny. While there's a deeper narrative waiting to be unearthed, filled with the intricate details that remain beyond our reach, the question, from where did we land here, is beginning to get some answers, and I can take some comfort in that. Amidst this inquiry lies a narrative thread concerning Mama, a story we can sense but cannot fully access due to the many gaps and omissions in our family history, prompting us to fill in the blanks with our own imaginations. Then there's a narrative thread concerning my grandfather, a topic I touch upon less here, but one that warrants exploration in another tome. Coffee Grove houses my history because of him, too, and because of this curious history of migration that contains some fascinating stories of land, food, and sustenance, and history with a big H. There are a lot of stories buried in this history that beckon to be excavated. And from skeletal facts, the women, Miss Elaine, Miss Carmen, and my mother, start to tell pure story, shooting the narrative ball from one person to the next, like a ping-pong match in words.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Allen-Paisant.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Big up to my people. Big up, big up, big up, big up. Thank you for coming.
Thank you everyone for being here. And honestly, if you would do me the honor of just clapping up this man one time. It's a phenomenal piece of work.